Hello, Peter? Yeah, just walking past the development now, doing very, very nicely. I'm sure the Yanks will love it. Tell them we've got an ornamental, old English koi carp pond going in at the back. That'll be fine. All right. Yeah, also, listen, if the council are kicking up a fuss about the concrete, tell them it's green and then no one will notice the difference from the motorway. The 1st of March 1998 was when the Countryside Alliance had the march in London. 300,000 people in London, the enormous demonstration. In fact, well, this was the odd thing, it wasn't a demonstration. There was not one Socialist Worker Party banner. There was no police looking miserable, fed up and belligerent, and none of the stewards had bullhorns to tell people what to chant. So you think, well, that's a little bit odd for a start-off. When you look at the march and you look at who was on the march, you have got all these, you know, the Concerned, the old dears, you've got what's left of the Tory party wandering around. First demonstration I've ever been on. Apparently you're supposed to call the police filth. Get the secretary to do that one though, I think. You know. And what they were saying was, this is a march about the countryside. The issues here are about the greenbelt, they're about development, it's about rural communities, rural poverty, it's about post offices, it's about conservation, all of these things. And you think, well, that sounds incredibly reasonable. Even the slogan was reasonable. Listen to us. And when you did listen to them, what they actually said was, we are the guardians of the land, we are the people who live and work there, we know how it works, you are trying to interfere, you'll destroy it, leave it to us, go away, die towny scum. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but that's roughly what they were saying.
What are you protesting against?
The right to have the country to ourselves.
The invasion of the greenbelt, basically.
In a nutshell, it's field sports in general.
Freedom.
Freedom, country pursuit. Freedom of choice.
Now, Janet George was the press spokesperson for the Countryside Alliance, and she was facing the Foster Bill. There was a huge Labour majority backing the banning of hunting with hounds. The public, there was a massive majority of support from the public, and she was up against it. And this is what she said, this was her strategy, to wrap up hunting in a wider rural fabric because everyone loves the countryside and hates hunting.
The Countryside Alliance first priority was to stop the Foster Bill. And that's why the rally was organised, that's why the march was organised, the timing of them, everything. They were about hunting. What the Alliance did, very sensibly, was to invite other countryside organisations who had issues that we supported.
It's quite simple. Bury hunting in the middle of the other stuff and get away with it.
There's nothing concealed about this. We never made any bones about the issue that it was triggered by Michael Foster's bill, which was an anti-hunting, anti-dog-owning, virtually, bill, which was very damaging to the countryside. That was what we all came together in defence of.
And you think, okay, but what about all the other issues? Aren't they important too? What did Janet George have to say about the other issues? And she's on record as saying, people would ring up and say, what do you think about such and such? And I'd make something up.
In fact, it was something that I was incredibly good at.
Right.
And it was the reason we got so much good press, was because I always had something to say on everything. You know, so if you
improvise on a theme.
Yeah.
I mean, in PR terms, you can understand her strategy. Because if, like, someone tried to ban pornography and you wanted to organise opposition against it, then you'd get Salman Rushdie to come and speak about freedom of speech and about the artist's right to challenge the state, and you get artists to talk about challenging taboos, and you get Harold Pinter to handing a petition to Downing Street. You wouldn't have men in Max with banners saying, we want pictures to masturbate to. Just as she's not going to have huntsmen walking around saying, we like killing things.
There was so much talk beforehand about the huge opposition that we would meet, this rioting that would be in the streets with all the millions of antis who'd be out there hitting us with their banners and everything. I saw 6. And I think of those 6, 4 were nice little old ladies saying, I don't think what you're doing is right. And they're perfectly entitled to that. And a couple were nasty great yobs, would have been shouting about anything, throwing bricks.
On that march were the biggest landowners in the country. In the middle of all of that, they were there. They were marching through London. They owned vast tracts of London. They're walking through. Oh, we're on my bit now. It's very good. That bit's Charlie's, that bit's Ronnie's, and that bit's the Crown's. They'll let me through. Come on, everyone. Everyone. And that was the biggest demonstration of landowners. And you have to say, well, let's remember this isn't a pro-hunting march. It's a countryside march. It's about all those wider issues. That means they're marching against rural poverty. That means some of the biggest farm landowners in the country must have woken up and thought, I know, I ought to give my casual labourers more money. And to make sure I go on a march. To make sure that I do give them more money. That's what I should do. And wandering around, what do we want? Higher wage bills. When do we want it? Index-linked, back-paid with a nice little pension and this insurance thing.
Oh, what a pity. Oh, what a shame. Someone is trying to ban country sports again. Why must they interfere with the running of the land?
This was the single that the Countryside Alliance tried to get into the charts. The plan was that they would launch this single on one day and everybody in the Countryside Alliance would buy it and it would go to #1. Didn't pan out like that.
Because we are the guardians, the keepers of the land, and we know what would happen if country sports were banned.
Now, we've actually met this chap who sings it, George Boyer, and for me, George Boyer actually represents quite a lot of the Countryside Alliance, because when you see him, he's this, he really is this sort of hands-on sort of fella. He's John Betjeman would have had him in a poem somewhere. He's a real country boy.
We know the glory of the countryside, the glory.
What the press release from the Countryside Alliance doesn't say is that he is Lord Denham's son. Now, I could be wrong here, but it does seem to me that they aren't keen to play up the class interests. And that really does sum up the Countryside Alliance.
The future lies with country sports, it does. The future lies with country sports.
The story of the countryside essentially is one of class. This is what it's all about. It's about who owns the land, what do they do with the land, what do they do with people who want access to the land, and how do they exclude us from it. And the great and the good claiming to be the guardians of the land. And what we're going to show you tonight is that that is a lie.
The responsibility for managing the countryside should be in the hands of the people who are on the ground, but what they need to be protected from is the huge temptation of large, vast sums of money, unimaginable sums of money, being offered to them to undermine that integrity by companies who are not responsible for the countryside ultimately, but they're responsible for making